The morning sun had barely begun to warm the streets when she stepped into the small schoolyard, her bag swinging lightly from one shoulder. It was a school like any other, with laughter echoing from the classrooms and the faint scent of chalk and wet earth mingling in the air. She moved quietly, her eyes often on the ground, not because she didn't want to look at the world, but because she carried something precious that made her careful with each step. Her notebook rested snugly inside her bag, its cover plain but soft from months of handling. This notebook was her world. Every page was filled with drawings, stories, and words she had poured her heart into. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a mirror of her thoughts, her worries, her dreams, the small moments that made her smile, and even the ones that made her cry. She had always been quiet, the kind of girl who noticed things others didn't. The way the sunlight fell on the classroom wall, the gentle sway of the trees outside, the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. She noticed everything. But her notebook was private. Even the closest friends never saw it. Sometimes she would write about them, or sketch them as they laughed and played, but they never knew, and that was okay. This notebook held her in a way that no one else could. That morning, as she walked through the school gate, her heart felt light. She loved school for many things, the learning, the friends she laughed with, but most of all, she loved the quiet moments when she could open her notebook and let her thoughts spill freely onto the page. Today, however, something felt different. She didn't know it yet, but soon her careful world would feel like it was falling apart. Classes began as usual. The noise of children shuffling, chairs scraping, and teachers calling out instructions filled the rooms. She sat at her usual desk near the window, the sunlight spilling over her books. Her bag leaned against her chair, unzipped slightly, the notebook peeking out just enough to be seen. Between lessons, she scribbled small notes on scraps of paper, making little sketches of the clouds she could see drifting lazily in the sky. The notebook rested there quietly, unaware of the day's coming turn. It wasn't until the final bell of the morning break that she noticed. She reached for her notebook, intending to copy down a quick thought she had had, but her hand brushed the empty space inside her bag. Her heart stopped for a moment. She looked around, unthinking, as if maybe it had fallen somewhere nearby. She checked under the desk, behind her chair, even in the small compartment of her bag, but it wasn't there. A sudden cold fear gripped her chest. The notebook was gone. She swallowed hard, trying to calm herself. Maybe she had left it somewhere, she thought. Maybe it was in another classroom or on the playground. But as she retraced her steps in her mind, every possibility made her stomach twist tighter. Her notebook wasn't just paper and lines. It was everything she had kept hidden, everything she had shared with no one. Losing it felt like losing herself. She got up quickly, her friends noticing the sudden panic in her movements. "What's wrong?" one asked, concern clear in their voice. She hesitated, unsure if she should tell them. The thought of someone seeing her private world made her cheeks burn. I can't find my notebook," she whispered finally, barely audible over the chatter of other students. Her friend's eyes widened. "Oh no, did you check the playground? Or the library?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, I've looked everywhere I can think of." Her voice trembled and she felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never felt so vulnerable in her life. Her notebook had been her secret and now it was gone. Perhaps into someone else's hands, perhaps lost forever. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. She walked through classrooms and corridors, asking teachers if anyone had seen a plain notebook. She described it carefully, hoping her words would paint an image in the minds of those who might find it. Some teachers gave sympathetic nods, some offered to help look later, but no one seemed to know where it could be. The weight in her chest grew heavier with each passing minute. She remembered the playground during break. That was the last place she had it. Maybe it had fallen while she was laughing with her friends or sketching on the bench near the old oak tree. She ran back there, scanning every corner, every bench, every patch of grass. Her hands shook as she knelt, brushing aside leaves and dust. Nothing. The notebook was gone. The fear that had been quietly simmering inside her now bubbled up into full-blown panic. She imagined all the pages scattered, lost, or maybe even read by someone else. She felt exposed in a way she had never felt before. The world seemed too loud, too chaotic, and she wanted nothing more than to crawl into a corner with her notebook, to feel safe again. Her friends stayed close, sensing her panic. One of them tried to comfort her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll find it," they said. Their words were kind, but they couldn't reach the part of her that felt empty. This wasn't just a notebook to be found. It was pieces of her life, pieces of her heart. And if those were lost, could she ever feel the same again? The morning dragged on, each passing hour making her more anxious. She went from classroom to classroom, retracing her steps in vain. Teachers began to notice, asking if she was all right. Some students whispered, wondering why she looked so distraught over a notebook. But those who knew her, those who had ever seen her sit quietly with a pencil in hand, knew it was more than a notebook. It was her world. By lunchtime, her panic had turned into despair. She sat alone at a corner table, her bag open in front of her, hoping against hope that it might magically appear. She remembered the drawings inside, the sketches of her family, the poems she had written about dreams she had never told anyone. She thought of the stories she had imagined late at night, the world she had created on those pages. Each memory made her heart ache. Losing the notebook felt like losing all of it at once. Her friends tried again, suggesting places she hadn't thought of. Maybe the art room, maybe the music room, maybe even at the school gate when she first arrived. She ran to each suggestion, retracing steps in a flurry of panic and hope, but still nothing. Every corner she turned, every room she searched offered only emptiness. The notebook was gone. It was during this moment of despair that she began to cry quietly, sitting on the edge of a bench in the playground. Tears ran down her cheeks, not from anger, but from the deep sense of loss she felt. It wasn't just the notebook. It was the feeling of being vulnerable, the fear that the pieces of her private world were now lost forever. Her friends gathered around, unsure what to say, unsure how to help. One friend knelt beside her and said softly, "We'll find it." I promise, as she wanted to believe them. She wanted to feel hope again, but the heaviness in her chest was too strong. She held on to that small glimmer of hope, repeating it in her mind as she wiped her tears and stood slowly. There was still the rest of the day, and maybe, just maybe, the notebook could be found. As the afternoon classes began, she kept glancing at her bag, half expecting it to be there. She stared at the floor, imagining the pages intact, the sketches safe, the words waiting to be read again. She pictured the notebook lying somewhere in the school, waiting for someone kind to notice it, waiting for it to return to her hands. The thought was fragile, but it was enough to keep her going, enough to make her heart beat a little steadier. Even as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the classroom floors, she refused to give up hope. This notebook was her life, and she would not let it go so easily. Somewhere in the school, someone might find it. Somewhere it waited to come back to her. And until then, she would search one step at a time, because losing it was not an option she could accept. The day ended with the bell ringing, signaling the final dismissal. She gathered her books, her hands trembling slightly, and walked slowly toward the school gate. Each step was careful, measured, as if she could somehow sense the presence of her lost notebook with her heartbeat. Her friends stayed close, offering support in small gestures, a gentle hand, a shared glance, a word of encouragement. She knew the notebook was gone for now, but she also knew that the search was not over. She would find it. She had to. Her world, her private world, depended on it, and so she stepped out into the fading light, her heart heavy but her spirit unwilling to give in. Somewhere, she thought, maybe just around the corner, her notebook was waiting, and when she found it, everything would be right again. The next morning, she arrived at school with the same careful steps, her mind heavy with thoughts of the lost notebook. The previous day had felt like a blur of panic and worry, but she refused to let herself give up. The notebook was gone, yes, but somewhere, she believed, it still waited. She just had to find it. As she walked past the school gate, she noticed her friends waiting for her, their eyes kind and full of concern. They had promised to help, and they meant it. "Are you ready to look again?" one of them asked gently. She nodded, trying to summon a small smile. "Yes, I have to find it," she said, her voice shaky but determined. Her friends fell into step beside her, forming a small circle of support that felt stronger than anything she had known before. Together, they walked into the schoolyard, glancing around for any sign of her notebook. The morning started slowly. She checked the benches near the playground, the paths behind the classrooms, and even the small garden near the school entrance. Each spot had been searched before, but today she looked at them with fresh eyes. Every leaf, every corner, every shadow could hide her precious notebook. Sometimes hope sparked when she thought she saw a small corner of paper peeking out, but each time it was just a stray scrap or a fallen leaf. Still, she refused to give up. As the search continued, her friend suggested asking other students if they had seen it. She hesitated for a moment, feeling exposed at the thought of strangers seeing her private world, but she agreed. Together, they went from group to group, quietly asking about a plain notebook, its cover soft and worn, full of sketches and words. Some students shook their heads, some shrugged, but one boy offered a small smile. "I haven't seen it, but I'll keep an eye out," he said kindly. She felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe today would be the day it returned to her hands. She clutched that tiny spark and held on to it, letting it guide her through the morning hours. During break, she went back to the playground, retracing every step she could remember from the day she lost the notebook. She knelt beside the old oak tree, brushing her fingers over the grass and leaves, hoping to find the faintest sign of it. Her friends sat quietly nearby, giving her space but staying close, their presence comforting. She thought of all the stories she had written, all the drawings she had made, and a wave of emotion hit her. Her hands trembled slightly as she remembered a poem she had written late at night, about hope and finding light even in the darkest times. The words had felt so powerful when she wrote them, and now they felt like a lifeline. She whispered them softly to herself, almost like a promise. "I will find you. I will not give up." After break, she visited the classrooms she had been in the previous day. Teachers noticed the determination in her eyes and offered help. One teacher even suggested checking the lost and found box at the school office. She ran there, heart pounding, but the box was empty. Her hope dimmed slightly, but she refused to let it die. She thanked the teacher and left, thinking of other places she hadn't searched yet. The afternoon was long and quiet, filled with small moments of hope and disappointment. She walked slowly through the corridors, glancing at every desk, every chair, every corner. Sometimes a notebook or a piece of paper would catch her eye, and her heart would leap, only to sink when she realized it wasn't hers. Still, she searched page by page, corner by corner. Her friends stayed close, offering encouragement in small ways. One of them carried a spare notebook and pencil, saying softly, "If you want, you can write something new while we keep looking. It might help." She shook her head gently, not wanting to create new work while her old one was still out there. The old notebook held memories, feelings, and thoughts that could not be replaced. This one was different. As the day went on, more students began to notice the search. Some offered to help, others simply watched, curious about the girl who seemed so determined to find a lost notebook. She didn't mind the attention. If anything, it gave her strength. Knowing that people cared, even a little, reminded her that she was not alone. She paused near the art room, thinking of the many sketches she had made in her notebook. Some were of flowers she had seen in the garden, others of faces she had noticed in the crowd. Each one was a piece of her heart, carefully drawn and written. The thought that someone else might see them made her stomach twist, but it also strengthened her resolve. She had to find the notebook. She had to. By mid-afternoon, the search had become more organized. Her friends decided to split up, checking different areas of the school systematically. She took the classroom wings, moving slowly and carefully. She opened drawers, looked under tables, and peeked behind curtains. Each small corner felt like a possible hiding place. Her heart would race each time she imagined finding it, and fall each time she didn't. At one point, she entered the music room. The soft hum of a piano in the corner made her pause. She remembered sketching a small drawing there a few weeks ago. Could it have been left behind? She knelt and looked under the benches, her fingers brushing the floor. Nothing. She stood up, trying not to feel defeated. The notebook was still out there, waiting for her. The sun outside began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the playground and classrooms. The light felt warmer, gentler, but the worry in her heart remained. She had searched everywhere she could think of, yet the notebook was still missing. She sat down on a bench, exhausted and anxious, letting her head rest in her hands. Her friends gathered around again, their presence quiet and steady. One of them spoke softly. "Maybe someone saw it and took it to the office? Or maybe it fell near the gate when you came in this morning." She nodded slowly, considering each suggestion. The thought of retracing the steps at the gate brought a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, it had been waiting there unnoticed. She rose and walked with her friends toward the entrance, scanning every inch of the pathway, every patch of grass, and every corner where the notebook could have been left. As they searched, she noticed a few other students joining in quietly. One girl pointed to a small pile of leaves near the bench. "Did you check there?" she asked gently. She nodded, remembering that she had, but checked again just to be sure. Her fingers brushed the leaves, but there was nothing. Still, the kindness of others, the willingness to help, warmed her heart. The school janitor passed by, noticing the small group searching intently. He stopped and asked if they needed help. She explained quickly about the lost notebook, her voice trembling slightly. The janitor nodded kindly. "I'll keep an eye out for it. If I see it, I'll let you know," he said. She felt a small sense of relief. Even if she hadn't found it today, there were others who cared enough to look. As the day drew to a close, she returned to the playground once more, sitting under the old oak tree. Her friends stayed around her, silent but supportive. She took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs. Her heart was heavy with worry, but she refused to give in to despair. She had searched everywhere she could think of, asked everyone she could, and yet the notebook remained missing. But she knew one thing. She would not stop looking. Her notebook was her voice, her thoughts, her feelings, and she could not let it disappear. She would continue searching step by step with the help of her friends until she found it. Even if it took days, even if it took weeks, she would not give up. As the last rays of sunlight faded, she finally rose, brushing her hands against her skirt. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself. "Tomorrow we'll search again." Her friends nodded, sharing a quiet determination. They had seen the importance of this notebook, the depth of her feelings, and they were committed to helping. The walk home was quiet, the streets bathed in the soft glow of evening lights. She clutched her bag tightly, half hoping, half fearing that the notebook might somehow appear before she reached home. Each shadow on the ground, each flicker of movement made her heart race. She imagined it lying somewhere nearby, waiting for her to notice it. When she finally reached her room, she sat at her desk, opening a blank page in a small notebook she kept for temporary notes. She began to write not about her sketches or stories, but about the search itself. She wrote about the kindness of her friends, the worry in her heart, and the hope that tomorrow would bring. Even if it wasn't the same notebook, writing gave her a small sense of relief, a way to process the emotions swirling inside her. Before going to bed, she placed the small notebook on her bedside table and closed her eyes. Her thoughts were filled with the lost notebook, with the pages that held her life. She whispered a silent promise. "I will find you. I won't stop. I will find you." And with that promise, she drifted into sleep, the hope in her heart burning quietly but steadily. Tomorrow she would search again. Tomorrow she would not give up. Somewhere in the school her notebook waited, and she knew somehow that she would find it. The next day, the girl arrived at school with the same careful steps, her heart still heavy with worry, but a quiet determination burning inside her. She had spent the night thinking about her lost notebook, imagining it somewhere in the school, waiting for someone kind to notice it and return it. She wasn't sure how, but she felt it in her heart that she would find it. As she walked through the school gate, she saw her friends waiting for her, already ready to continue the search. Their faces were kind, their eyes full of concern and support. "Are you ready?" one asked softly. She nodded. "Yes, we have to keep looking." The group moved together through the schoolyard. Something had changed overnight. Word of her lost notebook had begun to spread quietly through the school. Some students whispered to each other, curious about why she seemed so determined. Some teachers noticed, offering glances and subtle encouragement. Even the janitor who had promised to keep an eye out yesterday nodded as she passed by, giving a small smile that said, "We're looking out for you." The morning began with a careful search of the playground and surrounding areas. Every corner, every bench, every patch of grass was inspected with renewed care. Her friends had split into small teams to cover more ground, checking classrooms, hallways, and even the library. There was a quiet sense of urgency in the air, a shared feeling that this wasn't just about a notebook, it was about helping someone who needed them. She knelt beside the old oak tree, brushing leaves aside with careful hands. The bark was rough against her fingers, the ground beneath her soft from last night's dew. She imagined the notebook lying somewhere nearby, hidden in the shade or beneath the grass. The thought of it waiting there, untouched and safe, gave her a small spark of hope. Her friends stayed nearby, quietly supporting her, sometimes pointing out spots she had missed. As the morning passed, more students began to join the search. Some had heard about the lost notebook from friends, others from teachers. They moved quietly but purposefully, checking lockers, desks, and corners that had seemed unimportant before. One student noticed a small scrap of paper near a classroom door and picked it up, calling out, "Could this be it?" Her heart leapt, but when she rushed over, it was just a scrap from a different notebook. Still, the small gesture reminded her that people cared, that she wasn't alone. The teachers noticed the growing effort and began to offer more help. One teacher suggested checking the art room, where she often spent time drawing during free periods. Another offered to check the music room. Slowly, the search became more organized, more purposeful. It wasn't just her friends anymore. The whole school was quietly becoming a part of it, each person contributing in small ways. By late morning, she had checked nearly every classroom she had been in. Her heart was tired from hope rising and falling, from the constant search and disappointment. She sat on a bench near the library trying to catch her breath, when one of her friends came running toward her. "I think someone might have seen it near the cafeteria," they said. Excitement in their voice, her heart raced. Could it be? She jumped up, following her friend through the crowded hallways, each step quick and urgent. Near the cafeteria, a few students were gathered, whispering and pointing at the floor. Her pulse quickened as she approached. One of them held a plain notebook in their hands. "Is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The student looked at her and shook their head. "I'm not sure, but it looked like it." Her hand shook slightly as she reached for it, her friends surrounding her with encouragement. She opened it carefully, flipping through a few pages. The handwriting was different, the drawings unfamiliar. It wasn't hers. She felt a flicker of disappointment, but she refused to give up. Someone else had joined the search, someone who cared enough to notice the notebook. That meant hope was still alive. As the morning gave way to midday, she visited the lost and found box again, hoping against hope that maybe it had been turned in. The box was fuller than before. Students had been bringing in small items they found around the school, leaving them there in case someone claimed them. She carefully checked each item, her hands trembling slightly, but the notebook was not there. During lunch, a group of students gathered around her, offering suggestions. "Maybe it fell near the gate this morning," one said. "Or maybe it's in the library under a table or a chair," another added. Each suggestion gave her a small spark of hope. She thanked them quietly, her cheeks warming slightly from the kindness of her peers. She realized that even though the notebook was missing, she was not alone in her search. After lunch, she and her friends decided to check the classrooms once again, covering areas they had overlooked. They moved quietly, methodically, opening drawers and peeking under chairs. In one classroom, a student noticed a small gap between a shelf and the wall. Could it have slid back there? They asked. She knelt carefully, reaching into the narrow space, but only found a few scraps of paper and a lost pencil. Still, she refused to let her hope fade. The janitor walked by again in the afternoon, stopping to check on them. "I'll keep an eye out in the hallways and playground," he said kindly. "Sometimes small things like this turn up in the oddest places." She nodded, grateful for his help. His words reminded her that sometimes the smallest gestures could make a big difference. By late afternoon, she had checked almost every corner of the school. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve remained. She sat on a bench near the playground, letting her friends gather around her. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the ground. The warmth of the light was comforting, but it also reminded her of the passing time. The notebook was still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. As she rested, a few students approached quietly, holding small pieces of paper. "We thought you might like to draw on these while you keep looking," one said softly. She smiled faintly, appreciating the gesture, but shook her head gently. Her notebook was not just a collection of pages. It was a repository of her memories, her thoughts, her feelings. She could not replace it with scraps of paper. The school office called her in at one point. A teacher had noticed the growing concern and wanted to make sure she was all right. She explained quietly about the search and the importance of the notebook. The teacher nodded, listening carefully. "It sounds very special," they said. "Sometimes things like this are more than they seem. Keep looking and don't give up. You have friends and people around you who care." Her heart lifted slightly. Knowing that adults also understood and supported her gave her a small but important sense of reassurance. Back in the playground, she knelt again under the old oak tree, brushing leaves aside. She imagined the notebook lying somewhere nearby, untouched, waiting for her. The thought gave her a small warmth in her chest. Even though it had not appeared yet, she could feel it close. Her friends stayed with her, silent but attentive, offering a sense of comfort that was stronger than words. As the afternoon wore on, more students began to notice the search. Some joined quietly, others offered small suggestions. The school was beginning to feel like a community united by care and empathy. Each person who contributed, even in a small way, strengthened her resolve. She realized that the notebook had become more than just her own story. It had touched the hearts of those around her in some way, inspiring kindness and support. Her friends decided to check one last area before the final bell, the small storage room behind the classrooms. It was dimly lit and dusty, a place rarely visited. They moved slowly, carefully opening doors and peeking into corners. She reached into a narrow space between two shelves but found only old supplies. The disappointment was heavy, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, she gathered her things slowly. Her hands were tired from searching, her heart heavy with hope and worry, but she refused to let despair take over. She had come this far, and she would not stop now. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I will find you. I will not give up." As she walked home, her friends stayed with her, their presence steady and reassuring. They spoke quietly, sharing small thoughts and memories, giving her strength without overwhelming her. The streets were bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun, and she imagined the notebook somewhere nearby, waiting for her return. At home, she sat at her desk, opening a small notebook she kept for temporary notes. She wrote about the search, about the kindness of her friends, and about the hope that tomorrow might bring. Even though it was not her lost notebook, the act of writing gave her a small sense of peace. She knew the search was far from over, but she also knew she was not alone. As night fell, she placed the small notebook on her bedside table and closed her eyes. Her mind was filled with images of the lost notebook, with the pages she had written, the sketches she had made, and the feelings she had poured into it. She whispered a promise again, "I will find you. I will not give up." And with that promise, she drifted into sleep, her hope burning quietly but steadily, ready to face another day of searching. The next morning, she arrived at school with her heart pounding. The past few days had been a whirlwind of worry, searching, and small flickers of hope. But she refused to give up. She clutched her bag tightly, feeling the absence of her precious notebook as a weight in her chest. Her friends greeted her quietly, their eyes full of encouragement. They had promised to keep looking, and today she hoped might finally bring something. The school felt alive in a way it hadn't before. There was a sense of purpose in the air, quiet but strong. Some students she didn't know had begun asking about the notebook, offering to help search or to keep an eye out during the day. Even teachers and the janitor had become involved, checking corners, hallways, and rooms that were rarely visited. The community had quietly gathered around her worry, each small act of attention and care weaving a protective net of support. The morning began with a careful, systematic search. They started with the classrooms she had spent the most time in. Her friends split up again, checking desks, shelves, and drawers. She moved slowly, methodically, inspecting each corner, every gap between furniture, and every space where something small might be hidden. Her hands shook slightly with anticipation and fear, the thought of finding the notebook or failing to, pressing heavily on her heart. During the search, she remembered the little sketches she had made in the corners of her pages, the faces of friends, small doodles of flowers, the stories she had written about imaginary places she dreamed of visiting. Each memory reminded her of what she had lost and why she could not give up. This notebook wasn't just paper. It was pieces of her life, fragments of her heart, and losing it felt like losing a part of herself. By mid-morning, the search had intensified. Word had spread further, and even more students were joining quietly, checking lockers, cubbies, and spaces behind classroom doors. Some carried small scraps of paper to help her redraw lost sketches. Others brought pencils or colored pens for comfort, but she politely refused. The notebook could not be replaced. Every page held something that was hers alone. Her friends suggested revisiting the playground and the surrounding areas. She agreed, her heart lifting slightly at the thought. Maybe, she thought, it had been overlooked, tucked in a corner, hidden in plain sight. They moved carefully, checking beneath benches, around the trees, and along the edges of the playground. Every movement was slow, deliberate, as if the notebook might reveal itself at any moment. As the morning stretched on, she felt the pressure building. Her heart raced and her stomach twisted with anxious hope. She thought of all the moments she had captured in that notebook, the quiet afternoons writing poetry, the sketches she had drawn of clouds and sunlight, the small stories that only she had read. To imagine someone else holding it, reading her private world made her chest ache, but it also strengthened her resolve. She had to find it. Around mid-afternoon, the janitor approached quietly. "I think I may have found something yesterday evening," he said, his voice low but kind. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. He motioned for her to follow him. Her friends hurried alongside, their faces full of cautious excitement. Every step felt like it might lead to something, yet fear lingered. What if it wasn't hers? They moved toward the back of the school, where the storage area and some old classroom supplies were kept. The janitor opened a small door that led to a rarely visited corner. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through a high window, and the air smelled faintly of wood and old paper. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes scanning every inch. And then, just beyond a shelf, she saw it, her notebook, tucked carefully against the wall, slightly worn from its journey but fully intact. Her heart stopped. She rushed forward, her hands trembling as she reached for it. It was hers. Every page, every sketch, every word untouched. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched it to her chest. Relief, joy, and disbelief washed over her in a wave so strong she could hardly breathe. Her friends gathered around, cheering softly, their own faces filled with happiness and relief. She opened the notebook carefully, flipping through the pages as if confirming it was truly hers. Each sketch, each word, each poem she had poured her heart into was there, waiting for her. She ran her fingers over the lines, tracing the pencil marks, feeling the presence of her thoughts as if reconnecting with an old friend. The weight that had pressed on her heart for days lifted, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire being. Her friends watched quietly, understanding the depth of the moment. This was more than a lost notebook. It was a return of her voice, her private world, and her sense of self. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she hugged the notebook close, unable to speak at first. The quiet of the room felt alive, filled with a shared understanding. Even those who didn't know her well could sense the importance of what had just happened. The janitor smiled gently. "I'm glad you found it," he said softly. "I could see it was special." She nodded, unable to speak, her chest heaving. Her friends gathered close, offering small pats on her back, gentle smiles, and quiet words of encouragement. The notebook had returned, but more than that, the experience had reminded her of something even more important. She was not alone. The school, her friends, even people she barely knew had cared enough to help. That feeling of being supported, of being seen, was almost as precious as the notebook itself. She sat down with the notebook on her lap, opening it carefully. She traced the sketches, read the words, and whispered small apologies to the pages, forever fearing they might be lost forever. Each page told a story, not just of her life, but of the days she had spent worrying, searching, and hoping. She realized that the notebook had become a bridge between her private world and the people around her, even if she hadn't shared it directly. Her friends leaned in, peeking at the pages quietly, careful not to intrude but eager to celebrate with her. One of them smiled and said softly, "I can see why it's so important." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "It's everything to me," she whispered. "Everything I've thought and felt all in one place." The rest of the afternoon passed in a kind of quiet celebration. Students who had joined the search earlier gathered around, asking gently if they could see the notebook. She allowed a few small glimpses, feeling proud and comforted by their interest and respect. Teachers and the janitor offered quiet congratulations, their smiles warm and genuine. The notebook had returned, but it had also brought the community together in a way she had never imagined. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, she was walking home with the notebook carefully tucked in her bag. Her friends stayed close, chatting quietly, their presence a steady support. She felt lighter than she had in days, the weight of worry and fear replaced by joy and relief. Every step she took felt like a reclaiming of herself, of her private world, and of the hope that had carried her through the search. That evening, at home, she opened the notebook again, running her fingers over the pages. She traced the lines of her drawings, reread the words she had written, and smiled through her tears. Each page held a memory, a thought, or a feeling that she had poured into it. She realized that she had not just found a lost notebook, She had reclaimed a piece of herself, a piece that she had feared might be gone forever. She picked up a pen and wrote a small note at the beginning of the notebook, thanking everyone who had helped, even those who had simply offered a kind word or suggestion. She wanted to remember that this was not just her story, but a story of care, support, and kindness that had surrounded her. The notebook, she realized, had become more than a private space. It had become a symbol of connection. As she closed the notebook and placed it carefully on her desk, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in days. She thought about the friends who had helped, the students who had joined the search, and the teachers and janitor who had quietly watched over her efforts. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, had brought her to this moment. That night, as she lay in bed, she held the notebook close. Her heart was full of gratitude, relief, and quiet joy. She whispered a soft promise. "I will take care of you. I will never let you go." And with that, she drifted into sleep, feeling safe, whole, and deeply connected to the people around her, knowing that even in moments of fear and loss, kindness could lead her back to what mattered most. The morning after finding her notebook, she walked into school with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. The weight of worry and fear had lifted, replaced with something lighter, something warm. The notebook rested safely in her bag, its familiar cover now more precious than ever. She felt a quiet gratitude for having it back, and a new understanding of what it meant to be part of a caring community. Her friends met her at the gate with small smiles, their eyes bright with relief and happiness. "Did you sleep well?" one of them asked, walking beside her. She nodded, a small smile forming on her face. "Yes, I felt safe," she said softly. She didn't need to explain everything. They already understood. Over the past few days, their support had become more than gestures of friendship. It had been a shared journey, a quiet but powerful way of showing care. In class, she placed her notebook carefully on her desk. She traced the edges gently as if greeting an old friend. The teacher noticed and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the importance of what she had found. She felt a wave of warmth. The notebook was hers again, but it also felt like a bridge connecting her to the people around her. Each page held her thoughts and feelings, yes, but it also held the memory of kindness, patience, and care. During break, her friends gathered around her. They had been through the searching, the worry, and the hope together. Now they could finally relax. One of them handed her a small piece of paper with a tiny sketch of a flower on it. "For your notebook," they said with a grin. She laughed softly, tears of joy still threatening to spill. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could express. The rest of the day passed with a gentle rhythm. She moved through her classes, feeling more aware of the people around her. She noticed the quiet way some students watched her, perhaps remembering her search. She noticed how teachers offered small smiles or encouragement. She realized that her notebook had become more than just a private collection of thoughts. It had become a symbol of connection, a story that brought people together. During art class, she opened the notebook again. She turned the pages slowly, pausing at each sketch and poem. She had never shared most of them, and she didn't plan to. But now the notebook carried a new meaning. It wasn't just about her private thoughts anymore. It was about the journey to recover it, about the kindness she had experienced, and about the gratitude she felt toward those who had helped. She began to write a small note at the beginning, a quiet tribute to everyone who had been part of her search, acknowledging their care and support. After school, she stayed for a few minutes with her friends, walking through the playground and talking quietly. The sunlight slanted across the ground, warming the paths and the benches where they had spent so many hours searching. She remembered every moment of the last few days, the panic when she first realized it was missing, the frantic searches, the small sparks of hope, the disappointment, and finally, the relief of finding it. It all felt like a long, emotional journey that had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. She realized that losing her notebook had taught her more than she could have imagined. She had learned the power of community, the depth of kindness, and the importance of hope. Even in moments of fear and loss, she had discovered that there were people who cared, people who would act with empathy and compassion. That realization was just as precious as the notebook itself. Walking home that afternoon, she held the notebook close, her hands trembling slightly with a mix of relief and gratitude. She passed familiar streets and small shops, but now everything felt brighter, more alive. Each step felt lighter, each breath more calming. She thought about the small acts of kindness she had witnessed, the friends who had stayed by her side, the students who had joined the search, the teachers and janitor who had quietly supported her efforts. Those acts had carried her through her fear and worry, and now they filled her heart with warmth. At home, she sat at her desk, opened the notebook, and began to write. Not just her usual sketches or poems, but reflections about the past few days. She wrote about the panic of losing it, the anxious search, the moments of hope and disappointment, and finally, the overwhelming relief and joy of finding it. She wrote about the people who had helped, the kindness she had received, and the gratitude she felt. Each word seemed to make her feel lighter, as if the notebook had absorbed not only her private thoughts but also the love and care she had experienced. She paused often, reading over what she had written, smiling at the memories and the small moments of connection. She realized that the notebook had become more than a collection of personal thoughts. It was a record of resilience, hope, and shared humanity. Losing it had been painful, but finding it had been transformative. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to appreciate the people around her. That evening, she placed the notebook carefully on her bedside table. She sat quietly for a few moments, reflecting on the journey she had experienced. The tears she had shed over its loss now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a deep sense of peace and gratitude. She whispered softly, "Thank you," not just to the notebook, but to everyone who had been part of her story, everyone who had cared even in small ways. Over the following days, she began to notice a subtle change in herself. She felt more confident sharing small pieces of her art and writing with her friends. She still kept the notebook private for the most part, but she realized that sharing a little of herself could be safe and rewarding. She began to understand that vulnerability did not always mean exposure. Sometimes it could be a bridge to connection. At school, she smiled more openly, laughed more freely, and noticed the little things around her with renewed appreciation. The playground seemed brighter, the classrooms warmer, and even the hallways quieter and calmer in a comforting way. She had learned to value not just her own experiences, but the experiences of those around her, the small acts of kindness, the supportive gestures, the shared moments of care. One day, she returned to the playground where she had spent so many hours searching. She sat under the old oak tree, the notebook resting in her lap, and traced the rough edges of the bark with her fingers. She remembered the days of worry, the frantic searches, and the moments of hope that had guided her through. She smiled softly, realizing how far she had come. The notebook had returned, but so had a sense of perspective, a deeper understanding of herself and the people around her. Her friends joined her, sitting quietly, sharing in the calm and warmth of the moment. They didn't need words. The shared experience of the search and the relief of the notebook's return was enough. Together they sat in silence, watching the light shift through the branches, feeling the gentle breeze on their faces. It was a quiet celebration, a moment of connection and gratitude that needed no fanfare. Over the next weeks, she continued to write and draw in her notebook, but with a new sense of purpose. Each page felt more alive, more connected to the world around her. She began to notice small acts of kindness, to appreciate the quiet moments, and to understand the importance of caring for others. The notebook, once just a private space, had become a reminder of hope, resilience, and the power of community. She also began to share small parts of her work with her friends. Not everything, but little sketches, short poems, and brief stories. The act of sharing brought her joy, and she realized that some things were even more meaningful when others could experience them. The notebook had taught her that vulnerability could be safe, that hope could be shared, and that kindness could create connections stronger than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, she wrote a small note at the beginning of the notebook, thanking everyone who had been part of her journey, her friends, the students who had helped, the teachers, and the janitor. She wanted to remember the care and support she had received, to honor the people who had helped her find not just the notebook, but a renewed sense of trust and hope. As she closed the notebook and placed it on her desk, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. She had faced fear, anxiety, and the uncertainty of loss, but she had persevered. She had found her notebook, and in doing so, she had discovered the depth of human kindness, the strength of community, and the resilience within herself. That night, she held the notebook close as she lay in bed. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I will take care of you, and I will carry forward what I have learned." She thought of the friends who had supported her, the students who had helped, and the teachers and janitor who had quietly guided her. She felt a sense of connection and gratitude that filled her heart completely. Sleep came gently, with a sense of safety and completeness she had not known in days. The notebook rested nearby, a symbol not just of her private world but of hope, resilience, and the power of kindness. She dreamed of the future, of stories she would write, sketches she would make, and the connections she would continue to nurture. The loss had been painful, but the return had been transformative. In the days that followed, she approached her schoolwork, friendships, and life with a renewed perspective. She noticed small gestures of care, offered kindness without hesitation, and valued every connection she had. The experience of losing and finding her notebook had taught her lessons that extended far beyond the pages of paper. It had taught her about empathy, hope, and the beauty of human connection. Even as the seasons changed and the school year moved forward, she carried the lessons quietly in her heart. The notebook remained her private world, a safe space for thoughts, feelings, and creativity, but it also carried the memory of the community that had supported her. Each time she opened it, she remembered the journey, the fear, the hope, the search, and the joy of finding not just the notebook, but a renewed sense of trust in the people around her. And so life returned to its gentle rhythm. She wrote, drew, and dreamed in her notebook, but with a deeper understanding. She cherished the moments of quiet, the laughter of friends, and the small gestures of kindness that connected her to the world. The notebook had been lost, but it had returned stronger than before, carrying not just her thoughts, but the memory of love, hope, and human connection. She had learned that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, hope could guide the way and kindness could create bonds that would never be forgotten. The notebook had come back to her, but the lessons it brought were far greater. And every day, as she held it in her hands, she knew that she was stronger, braver, and more connected than she had ever been before.